Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Casual Criminalist. As always, I'm your host Simon. Welcome today, Thomas Neill Cream, the Lambeth poisoner. Neill Cream sounds kind of like a medical condition, or like a cream you'd put on your nails if you got like an ingrowing toe or something weird. Anyway, I used to live basically in Lambeth, like right next door, in Southwark. If I had to ask you to name a serial killer from the Victorian era, odds are you go, we all know it, Jack the fucking Ripper.
Jack the Ripper and then your mom, basically.
But old Saucy Jack wasn't the only murderous scumbag to haunt the streets of London, and there was another one who was every bit as cruel and vicious. Also, I feel like Matt's included this picture of him just because he's got an amazing top hat. Look at that. Kind of wish top hats were still cool. Be kind of awesome. Just rocking a top hat. Who thought that was a good idea? And instead of a knife or gun or even his bare hands, he used his charm, his brains, and a rather large dash of poison. This is a tale of a man who fancied himself a gentleman, aided by the fact that he was a certified medical doctor. Active for 11 years before all came to a close, this demented top hat has 10 bodies to his name, all women and all from the lower class. This is the story of Thomas Neill Cream, better known as the Lambeth poisoner. The doctor is in. Thomas Neill Cream was born on the 27th of May, 1850, in Glasgow, Scotland, the first child of William and Mary Cream. He would eventually be the eldest of 7 children. The family didn't stay in Glasgow for long. No one can blame them for that. Though, and soon after Thomas's 4th birthday in 1854, they packed up and moved across the pond to Quebec in Canada, where they set up house in Quebec City. Not much of anything is known about Cream's childhood or home life, but we do know that he was smart. Even from an early age, he showed how intelligent he was and scored high grades throughout his time in school. He attended Le Chute Academy and later became a student at McGill University in Montreal. He graduated in 1876 as a Doctor of Medicine and a Master of Surgery. Sounds very fancy. I'm a Master of Surgery. You're in great hands. I'm a master. And reportedly wrote his whole thesis on chloroform and its many uses. Interesting. During his graduation speech, people had graduation speeches? What the fuck's a graduation speech? Did he, graduate top... I think this is an American thing. No students gave a graduation speech. At my graduation, at least. Anyway, in this speech, he reportedly spoke about malpractice in the medical field and how the mistakes of those in their practice can be learned from so that they would refrain from killing those who they were charged with helping. Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? It's like, guys, have we considered learning from our mistakes so we don't kill people instead of healing them? It's like, yes, Tom, we've all thought of that, you dumbass.
Damn ironic, isn't it?
Just before we continue, a word from our fantastic sponsor, and that is, of course, Vessi Shoes. And no, they don't make them in these... they make them in these 2 colours, but they don't come together in these 2 colours like that, because that would be insane. You'd have different coloured shoes. They sent me 2 different pairs, because Vessi are excellent. This is the Weekends Neo. It's a great looking shoe. It's got this leather round here, beautiful stitching on here, fantastic grip. This is a perfect spring shoe, and I love how it looks. This is the same shoe, just in a bit more of a classic colour, black on white. I've had several pairs of Vessis just like this. And same leather round there, same stitching here, just a beautiful shoe. And I don't know, I particularly like this one. These are actually just arrived this morning, hence the laces are still done up as if they were in the box. I think I'm going to put these on immediately afterwards and enjoy wearing them. These are also, as with all Vessis, completely waterproof, not water resistant. So yeah, you'll always have dry socks. Spring is now, where it's kind of like winter into spring, and it kind of gets a bit rainy. That's just in the UK, and of course it was raining all the time. And I'm like wearing my Vessis, and I'm like, just walking across a field, no problem. My socks are completely dry, even though there is dew everywhere and rain always. The United Kingdom. They're basically a perfect shoe for whatever you are up to. So, if your March plans involve moving around, commuting, traveling, exploring, these shoes are worth absolutely checking out. You can get 15% off your first pair using my link, vessi.com/TCC. They also come with free shipping, a 30-day return window, and a 1-year warranty. So if you want a pair that keeps your feet dry and replaces, well, eventually all of your other pairs of shoes, give them a try. And now back to today's episode.
The irony and foreshadowing are palpable here. After graduating, Cream's interests and career path was clear. He wanted to be a doctor. Would be a bit of a problem if he didn't. He's like, no, I'm a master of surgery, doctor of medicine, been through school. I don't know if it was expensive back in the day. He's like, yeah, I've actually changed my mind. I think I'm going to be in politics. There was a bit of a speed bump, though. You see, graduating from McGill wasn't the only thing Cream did in 1876. At the time, he was living in Waterloo in Quebec, and being a young man, he had acquired the usual interest of young women. One woman in particular had his interest at the time, Flora Eliza Brooks, the daughter of a local hotel proprietor. You see, that year, Cream courted Flora, and she fell for him head over heels. So much so that the two of them did the horizontal tango all out of wedlock, which was quite taboo back in the day. Uh-oh, naughty, naughty! Well, nature ran its course, and Flora ended up pregnant. Cream decided to do the honourable thing and proposed to her, and they were engaged in September of 1876, just 4 months after his graduation. All's well that ends well, right? Well, actually, no, not quite. About a month after the happy couple were betrothed, Flora started complaining about terrible pains in her stomach. Her father, Lyman Brooks, took her to see the doctor, and it was there that it was revealed that Flora had recently terminated the pregnancy, courtesy of one Thomas Neill Cream. Now, first off, even today terminating a pregnancy isn't the most pleasant thing, so you could imagine how awful they were back in the 1800s, especially the back alley kind from a man without proper certification. He's a master of surgery. Dangerous isn't a strong enough word, and forget stomach cramps, one wrong move could have killed her outright. And second, if you thought having premarital sex and getting pregnant out of wedlock was a no-no back then, terminating a pregnancy was just as bad, if not more so, especially for a conservative family like the Brooks. So to say that Lyman was furious is putting it lightly. And in order to save face in the community, he grabbed his daughter, retrieved Cream, who was attempting to flee Quebec, by the way, and practically forced them to say, "I do" with haste. Now, Cream was married by force, so what do you think the first thing he did before the ink on their new marriage license had time to dry? Yes, he ran the fuck away. What the f*** is happening in this story? That's right, instead of being a man and accepting his newfound responsibilities, old Tom bolted as fast as he could to England. Wait, but does he... The baby is right? Not anymore. The very day after the wedding, in fact, he'd claimed that it was to continue his medical studies, and this is factual, but it was also to get away from Flora, her family, and any sense of marital duties that he was expected to undertake. None of the Brooks family ever saw or heard from him again, and Flora was left holding the flowers and ring, a wife in name only. And sadly, all she was truly left with was the pain of an amateurish abortion, one she was left with for the rest of her days, which unfortunately wasn't long, as she reportedly died from tuberculosis the very next year in 1878. Well, what can we say? Fuck the past. Cream spent the entirety of 1878 in the UK, receiving his postgraduate training at St Thomas's Hospital Medical School in London and obtaining additional qualifications as a physician and surgeon in Edinburgh. After this, he would end up returning to Canada, namely London, Ontario, where he managed to set up a small practice at 204 Dundas Street and specialised in terminating unwanted pregnancies. Fucking hell, mate, were you just like, yeah, no, that first one was so great, this is what I want to do, you psycho? At first, he was mildly successful, and had several women come to him for help. He also built up a solid reputation and earned himself a comfortable living. That is, until the first body was found. Uh-oh! In 1879, Catherine, or Kate Hutchinson Gardner, went to 204 Dundas Street to have her pregnancy terminated. For some reason, Cream had initially refused to perform the abortion. Instead, he made a suggestion. She should blame the baby-to-be on a local businessman with whom she had had relations in order to get money from him. He'd be like, "Doctor, that's not what I'm here for. You're not my financial advisor, Doc." She refused to do it, though, and threatened to poison herself if he didn't perform the operation. Well, perhaps this veiled threat, instead, turned into inspiration. Soon after her appointment, Kate Gardner was found dead. Her body had been unceremoniously dumped inside of an outhouse directly behind Cream's office, a bottle of chloroform next to her body. Jesus. The police were fast on the scene, and along with the bottle of chloroform, they also found a note on her written to the same businessman Cream had spoken to her about, the one they believed could be the father of her baby. Of course, it was utter nonsense, and her family knew it. They knew Kate's handwriting and her signature, and what was written on that note certainly wasn't that. Speaking with her friends, the police were informed that Kate had gone for an abortion with Dr. Cream, and then her body happened to be found right behind his office. Not suspicious at all, right? All of this evidence continued to pile up, and yet in the end, Cream was never formally even investigated. What the There was a body found out the back of his practice from someone he knew. What is happening, 19th century police in Canada? Where are the people on the horses? Come on, get the horse people in and solve this. And to this day, Kate's murder officially remains unsolved. I think we can guess who did this. And when people asked him how he believed Kate had died, he simply told them the poor girl had been diagnosed with senescence, and she had likely taken her own life as a result. What the is senescence? What is senescence, I hear you ask? Matt and I on the same page. Well, that's aging. It's just a fancy term for aging. He literally said she killed herself because she was getting older. Okay. Right. It's like, the idiopathic is a medical term for, I don't know. It's like, he's got an idiopathic tremor. It means he's got a tremor and we don't know what the is causing it. I have idiopathic night sweats. I get very sweaty in the night, and eventually I was like, okay, go see the doctor, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you, you just seem to be sweaty at night. This isn't a sponsorship, but if you do want to sponsor me, 8 Sleep, you should, because your shit's really expensive, but oh my god, is it good. Like, guy, Drew, if you're watching this, Drew is the guy who sells all my adverts, I'll remind you about it. Hopefully I'll remember to send you an email about this, but dude, we should get 8 Sleep as a sponsor, because I don't sweat in the night anymore. I just sleep super comfortably every night, and it's amazing. Anyway, moving on from my idiopathic night sweats, to say that this made no sense at all is an understatement. Her family was sure that it'd done it. Her roommate testified that she thought it'd done it, since Kate had told her she was specifically going to Cream so that he could bring her right. Yet nothing was done, and the idea that she'd killed herself because she was getting older, clearly preposterous. And what's more, you can't kill yourself with chloroform, at least not effectively. Chloroform doesn't work like we see in the movies, where someone instantly passes out from breathing it. You need to hold it there for minutes on end for it to take effect, and even then you need the exact right amount or it won't do much of anything. Oh, for some reason I assume she'd drank it, which can't be good for you, right? Regardless, Cream was in the clear, but only just. The coroner for the case believed that Kate had been murdered, and while Cream wasn't charged, he was now known to the cops and the public. And when word got out that a body had been found in the outhouse outside his practice, Cream's clientele dried up, as did his business. Surprise! And so, packing up shop, Dr. Cream would leave Canada once again, heading down south and over the border to the good old US of A, specifically the windy city of Chicago, Illinois. Death in a top hat. Setting up within the red light district of Chicago, guess it's a good place for business, Cream got... It's grim, dude. Cream got to work. What better spot to set up practice, right? And for an abortionist on the sly, well, he was never going to want for work, as sex worker after sex worker graced his office door, wanting to get rid of the unwanted consequences of their nightly escapades. It didn't take... When did they invent birth control? I feel like it was probably a bit later or something, wasn't it? Although weren't people using, for some reason, goat intestines? Which is pretty fucked up. It didn't take long at all for the local police to catch wind of the new abortionist, and it even got in the occasional assistant in the form of an African-American midwife by the name of Hattie Mack. Sadly, being in the red light district came with a plethora of opportunities to conduct his darker business. Mary Ann Faulkner went to see Dr. Cream in August of 1880. Like Kate, she wanted to terminate a pregnancy, and like Kate, it didn't end well at all. He did do the termination, but he ended up botching the job, killing her in the process. Cream had performed the procedure in Hattie's apartment, and when Mary Ann passed away, he didn't bother cleaning up after himself. When Hattie came home to find the body of a young woman in her home, she abandoned the place, but the police still arrested her on suspicion of murder after someone came across Mary Ann's body and pointed the police in Hattie's direction. Hattie instantly turned on Cream, as you would. She's not turning on him, she's just saying it like it is. Saying he'd performed at least 15 abortions while she was present, and that he had forced her to keep Mary Ann in the apartment as she was recovering from the procedure, only for her to get an infection and die. Cream was investigated for it, even taken in for questioning, but he countered that Mac was actually the one who attempted to perform the termination, and he was just there to lend a hand. Wait, the nurse was the one doing it and the doctor's being the assistant? Please. In the end, Cream was brought before a jury on charges of murder, excellent, with Hattie testifying against him, but during Cream's murder trial, the jury was asked to consider the word of a white doctor, against the word of a black midwife. Right, so they obviously decided that Cream's version of events was the truth. It's preposterous, this is outrageous, I am a white man, and a doctor nonetheless. What the past. So they obviously decided Cream's version was the truth, and by the end of the trial, Cream was let free. No fuss, no muss. A few months later, the same month he was acquitted of murder, in fact, Cream murdered his third victim. This was Ellen Staggs, who was poisoned while visiting Dr. Cream in December 1880. What's more, Cream then tried to blackmail the pharmacist, Frank Pyatt, who had prescribed the medicine in exchange for not going to the cops. Thankfully, Frank was no pushover, and he went to the police himself about Cream. Good for you, Frank. Legend. And even then, there was no evidence. Nothing strong or concrete, at least, so they couldn't do anything to him. If I was Frank, I'll be like, I don't want to get poisoned to death. I'm going to leave town. At this point, despite his plummeting reputation, Cream was still finding some success. Desperate women still gladly made use of his services, despite knowing that the one providing said services was considered to be a scoundrel. I mean, not just a scoundrel, but a murderer. And on top of that, he started marketing that it actually found a cure for epilepsy in the form of a miracle elixir. So abortionist, murderer, and snake oil salesman. The list of crimes goes on and on. Then, in February of 1881, Dr. Cream received a visit from one Julie Stott, who saw an advertisement he had placed in the local newspaper. She didn't need his services for herself, mind you, but for her beloved husband, Daniel, who had, oh, right, okay, because he's the epilepsy guy now as well. I'm like, oh, what's happened to Daniel? He ain't pregnant. Who had suffered from epilepsy for years. Cream happily wrote up a prescription and sent her off. After taking the pills as prescribed, Daniel actually saw some improvement in his condition. Placebo's a hell of a thing, I suppose, and so repeatedly returned to Cream for more, hoping to remove his accursed condition over time. In April of 1881, another woman was found dead. Her name was Alice Montgomery, and she desperately wanted to bring an end to her pregnancy. Her body was found a block from Cream's office, and her autopsy revealed that her pregnancy had been terminated. But the coroner also determined that she had died as a result of poisoning via strychnine. Her death was declared to be murder, and was ruled as such, but outside of that, nothing came of it. It's like, well, looks like we got another murder on our hands. Is that right? Moving on. I don't know why I gave them posh old British accents, because this is happening in America, but it just, I don't know, it fits with the vibe. Maybe they spoke like this back in the day. That little side out of the way, we return to Daniel Stott and his magical recovery process. I say magical because, as we all know, the pills were utter nonsense and nothing was actually being done about his illness. Well, I suppose that's not true, as the pills did actually do something. They killed him. On July the 14th, 1881, Daniel Stott was found dead at 61 in his home in Belvedere, Illinois. Originally, the cause of death was considered to be natural, but Cream just had to stick his nose into things, that greedy louse. He simply had to try and blackmail the pharmacist who gave Daniel the pills, which again, Cream himself created, and when... what you smoke? What? How do you think that's going to work? And when that didn't work, to get him more money, he wrote to the coroner to try and get that man arrested. He even helped Julie to file a lawsuit against the pharmacist. But his plan backfired. It's the worst put together plan I've ever heard. The coroner was no fool, and he realised that something was clearly fishy here. After getting a hold of one of the pills Daniel had been taking, he sadly fed it to a dog as a test. And the poor thing expired within 15 minutes. The coroner then had Daniel exhumed, and after opening him up, they found that his stomach and intestines contained enough strychnine to kill him 3 times over. And just like that, a warrant was issued in the name of Dr. Cream for murder. As soon as he found out, the little weasel once again turned tail and fled. Not to Lebanon, though. No, just back up to Canada. As I always say, you got to flee to Lebanon. They don't extradite anybody. That obviously didn't work too well, and he was apprehended in Belle Riviere, Ontario, and returned to Belvedere to stand trial in September 1881. Dude, the other day, 2 days ago, I got an email from, like, one of those, rounds, like, mail merge general. What was it, like a newsletter? Not a newsletter, but like an alert from my kid's school. And they're like, hi, just letting you know that there's a murderer. No, they didn't even say murderer. There's a criminal who's been seen after committing a crime in the woods surrounding the school. Just letting you know. And I'm like, why do I need to know this? He's in the woods around the school. He's not on the school grounds. I'm sure there's plenty of criminals all over the place. And then my wife's like, oh my God, that guy, the criminal, he's a murderer. He burned a woman to death. And I'm like, holy what? And then we get an email like later that evening being like, oh, they arrested him in Poland. Like, okay, dude. Before the trial even started, Cream's life had started falling apart. His father disowned him entirely, and even though 2 of his siblings attempted to aid him financially, it wasn't enough for any sort of high-quality defense team. On top of that, Julie Stott didn't even have his back and turned state's evidence, saying it was all on Cream, that he'd seduced her to avoid jail time. It was all Cream's plan to kill her husband and blackmail the pharmacist to get a nice fat payday. Perhaps she was in on it. Cream was good-looking and charming after all, but that's neither here nor there at this point. And in the end, despite Cream trying to paint Julie as a terrible woman who poisoned Daniel herself, the jury wasn't having any of that. Thomas Neill Cream was found guilty and sentenced to life at the Illinois State Penitentiary at Joliet Prison. After that, Daniel's friends put up a tombstone for him, one with a custom inscription which read, "Daniel Stott died June 12, 1881, aged 61 years, poisoned by his wife, Dr. Cream." Now that should be the end of things, right? I mean, usually, when we come to the point in the story where a life sentence is given, that's the finish line. Sadly, that's not the case here. In the end, thanks to good behaviour, a fairly sizable inheritance left by his father despite the disownment for some reason, and payments and pleas to several high-ranking political officials by one of his brothers. Cream was released in July 1891 after having served only 10 years of a life sentence. He went to prison for murder. Did he buy his way out of prison? What the f***? However, despite said good behaviour, Cream only got worse behind bars, and not only developed a full-on drug habit, but also a proper hatred for women and sex workers in particular. He believed they were a menace to society, a blight to be scrubbed out, and he would be happy to do the scrubbing. Julie's betrayal sent him over the edge, and now he wouldn't just kill for money, he'd kill for satisfaction too. At first, Cream tried to seek out Julie. She took 10 years from him, and he'd take all that she had left. But thankfully he couldn't find her. Using the money that he had left from his inheritance, Cream eventually made his way to England, arriving on October 1st, 1891 in Liverpool, before eventually heading to London, where he set up residence at 103 Lambeth Palace Road in Lambeth. Now I'm curious where that is. How close was this to where I lived? Let me see. Oh, quite close. Quite close. There we go. How about that? Fascinating, Simon. And with a new city came a new slew of poor unfortunates, people he could use to satisfy his dark desires. Ellen Nellie Donworth was a 19-year-old sex worker in Lambeth, one who caught the wrong kind of attention from the dear doctor. It was October 13th, 1891, not even 2 weeks after arriving in England, that Cream had sent her 2 letters proposing that they meet. Undoubtedly thinking this was simply a man calling for her services, she agreed. Upon meeting, they got to talking and Cream produced a small bottle, asking that she drink it down. Okay, perhaps believing it to be alcohol, she did as asked, downing it. By the end of the night, she'd collapsed on the pavement near Waterloo Station and was carried home while she was suffering from awful convulsions and painful cramps in her stomach. And she knew exactly who had done it too. A tall, dark, cross-eyed man gave me something to drink, some white stuff. After it was determined that she'd passed away from strychnine poisoning, Cream wrote to the coroner, claiming that he knew who the killer was and offering to tell them for £300,000. That is an insane amount of money. I feel like, Matt, that must be a mistake, because £300,000 in the 19th century would be dozens of millions of pounds today. I'll give this to him, at least he decided to use a fake name, A. O'Brien, and even tried passing himself off as a detective. He even tried to blackmail a local bookstall owner for money so Cream wouldn't finger him as the killer. Be like, bro, I didn't do anything. Off. A week later, on October the 20th, 27-year-old Matilda Clover was next. Another sex worker and known alcoholic, she met with Cream that night, and after introducing himself as Fred, he offered her a handful of pills, saying to take 4 before bedtime. She didn't think much of it, but for hours after, she was racked with searing pain inside, and all the while she knew Cream had poisoned her. That man, Fred, had poisoned me. He gave me pills. Then, after saying goodbye to her 2-year-old son, she passed away. At first, the authorities thought she'd died from a heart attack brought on by her love of the drink, but then they got a letter, one addressed to famous physician William Broadbent, signed M. Malone, aka Cream. The letter claimed that Malone knew Broadbent was complicit in Matilda's death, and he demanded £25,000 in exchange for his silence. Broadbent, clearly not impressed, and well respected and trusted by his peers and the authorities, simply took the note to Scotland Yard. Yeah, as you would. If that arrived in my letterbox, I'd be like, no, I'm just going to go straight to the police. Like, I haven't done anything wrong, f*** you. I'm going to roll the dice on this one. They then attempted to set a trap for the blackmailer, but unfortunately it never panned out. After that, Cream briefly returned to Canada, both for a vacation and to purchase more poison, 500 pills worth of strychnine from a drug vendor in Saratoga. And as soon as he got back to London, he went hunting for his next victim. Was strychnine not available in the UK? On April 2nd, 1892, Louise Harvey had a run-in with Cream. He offered her a night on the town, dinner, and a show, and she accepted. However, before they parted at the Charing Cross embankment near the River Thames, he gave her a couple of pills, insisting it was for her pale complexion and that she take them right away. She did, but his pushy demeanour made her suspicious, so she instead hid them in her mouth, disposing of them in the Thames after it left. Regardless, she arrived for their date later that night, but he never showed. She'd managed to dodge a bullet, all because her instincts were on point. His final 2 victims died at the same time. One of them wasn't even 20 yet. Alice Marsh, 21, and Emma Shrivel, 18, were roommates and lived in a flat on their own. On April the 11th, 1892, they ran into Cream and, finding him charming and attractive, invited him back to their flat. They spent the night together, and all seemed well until the next morning when Cream was about to leave. Before he did, though, he offered them pills to take once he was gone. They did, and after hours of pain and confusion, both girls passed away, scared and unsure what was happening. The Lambeth poisoner had struck again for the final time, in fact, as now that he was both known and named, it would be his own arrogance and ego that would lead to his undoing. How's it hanging, Dr. Neill? As stated, the public was very aware by now that there was a serial killer on the loose. Too many women, too many sex workers were being found dead with poison in their systems. And only a few years after the reign of terror that plagued Whitechapel at the hands of Jack the Ripper, the public wanted him caught. Thankfully, not only were the police hard at work to nail this guy, but Cream, despite being a doctor, was also unbelievably stupid. You see, like Jack and his twisted letters, several of the kills were accompanied after the fact by poorly thought-out blackmail letters, but unlike Jack, who was never caught, the blackmail letters actively worked against him. In the case of Matilda specifically, it actively turns the authorities away from the natural causes diagnosis and placed it firmly on foul play. And now the dots are starting to come together. All the letters correlating with all these dead sex workers, more bodies now being placed at the feet of the Lambeth poisoner. And then Cream fucked up. You see, at this point, given how he still hadn't gotten caught and his initial jail time was cut so short, Cream had become ungodly arrogant with an ego the size of Big Ben, and naturally, someone like that can't help but brag, and who better to brag to than a policeman? Yep, that's right, this idiot made friends with a cop, namely former New York City detective John Haynes. He'd been living in London for a while with the hopes of joining the ranks of Scotland Yard, and being a good cop amidst the panic of the poisoner, he'd been keeping up with as many of the details as he could. Now, having an acquaintance that had taken such a big interest in his activities, Cream knew exactly what to do. Run his mouth. He regaled his friend with his in-depth knowledge of each and every crime that took place at the hands of their local nutter, even bringing him out to tour the crime scenes. When Haynes asked how Cream knew so much, he simply said he'd been keeping a close eye on the news coming out about the killings, just like Haynes, who wasn't nearly as informed. They're going to be very suspicious, like, no, I've been really following this, and I'm a detective. And you've been following this really well? How do you know all these extra details? Mr. What was his name? Mr. Cream? Sounds like an ice cream brand. Of course, Haynes had friends in Scotland Yard, including one Inspector Patrick McIntyre. He'd been trying to get Haynes on the force, namely as a detective, and Haynes had reached out to him right away after his conversations with Cream. Cream had also mentioned Louis Harvey, whom the police had no idea about. Can you say stupid?
What are you? An idiot sandwich.
Right away, they started looking into Cream, and it became clear that the good doctor wasn't as good as he seemed. First, they discovered that not only did he have an affinity for sex workers, but that he'd gotten a fake passport listing his name as Thomas Neill. They also found out about his shady past, both in Canada and America, and how death seemed to follow him rather closely wherever he went, including his arrest and time in prison for the murder of Daniel Stott. Yeah, I'd be like, bro's a murderer. That's gonna, we're looking for a murderer. Could it be this guy, or could it be this guy who is a murderer already? You know what they say, once a murderer, always a murderer. All of the evidence they'd been able to get their hands on was enough for them to apply for a warrant of arrest, and the Lambeth poisoner was arrested on June 3rd, 1892. He was charged with the murder of Matilda Clover, soon to also be charged on July 13th with the murders of Ellen Donworth, Alice Marsh, and Emma Shrivel, as well as the attempted murder of Louis Harvey and several counts of extortion. Bro's gonna get the short drop. Or the long drop? The long drop, right? His trial took place at the Old Bailey in October 1892, and it only lasted for 5 days. At the trial, Cream was stoic, cold, and resolute. He maintained his innocence, no matter how much evidence was brought forth. He repeatedly claimed they had the wrong man, that he was simply Dr. Neill, and so the prosecution mockingly referred to him as such. It's good. Evidence, testimony, and his own arrogant stupidity finally caught up with the good doctor, and after needing only 12 minutes to deliberate, the jury came back with a verdict. Dr. Thomas Neill Cream was found guilty on all counts, and Justice Henry Hawkins gave the only sentence appropriate: death by hanging. There we go, well deserved. After the trial, Cream was housed at Newgate Prison in London next to the Old Bailey. Unlike today, where it's commonplace in America to wait years for an execution to take place, back in the day in England, they didn't wait nearly as long. In fact, it was the very next month that Cream had his date with the noose. As he awaited his end, Cream rewrote his will, leaving his estate to his solicitors, and, soon enough, the day of reckoning came for the doctor. On the morning of November the 15th, 1892, Cream was... Wait, this is literally just like... Oh, it's literally the next month. Get out. He was led to the gallows within the prison, as public executions had been outlawed almost 30 years prior in 1868. That didn't stop people from gathering outside the prison, though, calling for Cream's demise, as the Toronto Globe reported the very next day. Probably no criminal was ever executed in London who had a less pitying mob awaiting his execution. And as Cream was placed standing atop the trapdoor, and famed executioner James Billington tightened the rope around his neck, perhaps only then did the finality of the situation dawn on Cream. Really? That was when? Not being let up there? Not when you got the death sentence? He was going to die. There was no escaping this, no honeyed words or wads of cash that would free him this time. And so he did the only thing he knew how to do, what he did best after all: lie, and claim false prominence. I am Jack the... And then it was over. The lever was pulled, the trapdoor opened, and with a sudden stop and a resounding snap, the Lambeth poisoner, Dr. Thomas Neill Cream died, aged 42, at the end of the hangman's rope. Good. Originally buried beneath the flagstones of the prison, his body was later disinterred in 1902 and moved to the City of London Cemetery, where he remains as a resident to this day in an unmarked grave in section 339. His medicine/poisoning kit now being featured in the Crime Museum for all to see. Wrap up. Just like that, with a snap of a rope, we're at the end of our story today. A rightful end to a despicable man, one who showed no sign of remorse or compassion for his victims in the slightest. Thomas Neill Cream was a beast in the guise of a man, one of medicine and science, who used his learned ways to weasel his way into the lives of his patients. And in the end, he was there, at the end of the lives of those same patients. And for what? Money. What else? A greedy worm of a man. He'd surely have been forgotten to the endless threads of history, if not for his supposed last words, which inevitably served to tie his name to Jack's for decades to come. I'm assuming that he can't be, because he wasn't in the country or something, right? Indeed, the words, "I am Jack," persist even to this day, though when put under the microscope, the validity of them and the very idea he spoke them comes into heavy question. First of all, the timeline doesn't add up. All of Jack's murders, the canonical ones anyway, took place in 1888. Do you want to know where Cream was in 1888? Yes, he was in the Illinois State Penitentiary. So not only was he in prison, but he was an entire ocean and continent away, not to be released for another 2 years. Hasn't stopped some so-called Ripper experts from trying to come up with excuses, though, whether it be the idea that he bribed the guards to get an early release, or that his stint in prison was served by a body double. Some people just come up with the darndest things. Especially when every single reputable source at the time, including Cream himself and his family, all called those ideas false. Many consider it likely that James Billington was simply telling a bunch of bullshit in regards to what he claims to have heard. Not every day you hang a notorious murderer, but why not make yourself famous as the man who hanged Jack the Ripper? A bit for fame and notoriety, says I, though there is a slightly more comical idea coined by one of Cream's own biographers. It was brought forth that in those final moments before the drop, Cream was scared out of his mind, and he started to lose control of his body functions. And with that, his sensitive bits began acting in kind, causing his last words to be a stammered, "I am ejaculating." The gentleman jackass, petrified with fear, died swinging with a load in his trousers. Quite the humorous thought. Wait, what? When people say you're losing your body functions because of fear, it means you're pissing yourself. Or yourself? It doesn't mean you're... Right? With that settled and done, our story at an end, I'd like to take a moment to think of the victims. Catherine Hutchison Gardner, Mary Ann Faulkner, Miss Stack, Alice Montgomery, Daniel Stott, Ellen Nellie Domworth, Matilda Clover, Alice Marsh, Emma Shrivel. None of these people deserved to die. They were just living their lives, trying to get by, and simply looking for help. And they sadly ran across this pathetic little man who wanted nothing more than money and murder. Thank you for watching.